Perfect. Hello, everyone. I am so happy to welcome you to our webinar today. My name is Aleodor Lazarescu. I am from Bucharest, from Romania, and I'm glad to be here with you. And I just wanted to wish everybody a beautiful spring. We have here a beautiful weather this year, and I do wish to everyone the beauty and the renewal forces to bless you this year. And I want to say how much I appreciate that you have joined us today. These MISTEC webinars have brought to you a great variety of topics that intend to help us in our spiritual development in this fifth post-Atlantean cultural age, which we will obviously be talking more about today, which is an age of technology. Rudolf Steiner has always pointed out the importance of counterbalance in these times of Achimanic influence. So today, Andrew, the co-founder of MISTEC, will speak on this theme, the theme of human evolution from an anthroposophical perspective. And for me, especially as a Waldorf trainer, an engineer, and a future psychologist, this topic is of utmost importance anytime and anytime. So Andrew has formed and worked on 10 study courses that they typically meet online in the MISTEC community. These are 12-week courses that use excerpts from Rudolf Steiner's lectures and books. Many of you know of the themes of the destiny of the human body, refined breeding, and the mysteries of evil. He lives near Boston and is the president of the Anthroposophical branch. He is a member of the School of Spiritual Science and its Natural Science section. I do wish, before we start, to remind you to not forget about the MISTEC conference in August and the theme of Incarnation of Achiman. I, for one, cannot wait for the lectures to come. I think it is very important and they will be very, very interesting. Also, I want to remind you that all the recordings of the webinars and of the conferences are available on the website, mistec.org. And with this, I turn it over to you, Andrew.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And Aleodor, for that introduction. I'm quite happy that we can do this today. We'll be talking about evolution. And so let me mention that in 3 weeks, we'll also be celebrating Good Friday, when Christ Jesus was crucified, laid in a tomb, and then on Easter Sunday, Rudolf described this event as the turning point in time, when his blood dropped from his dying body into the earth, changing the earth's aura. Since then, Christ, according to Steiner, is the spirit of the earth. For those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, tree sap has been rising already for a month. It is in Vermont and here in New England, maple syrup time. And I don't know if any of you have ever experienced it, but it's wonderful time. It smells wonderful out there in the woods where these huts are boiling down the sap to maple syrup. And this relatively warm rising sap here has been melting the snow around the tree trunks. And everywhere I look, where I live, I see buds swelling. Daffodil spears have pierced the ground, and I know they're hoping to bloom in a few weeks. Spring warmth spawns warm enthusiasm that I hope to bring to all of you during this webinar. I will give an overview of Rudolf Steiner's view on human and earthly evolution. This will not be centered on the apparent discrepancies between dating, and I don't mean, dating the fossil records in Steiner's perspective. We typically consider evolution as what was in the past. In the beginning, the Logos was. I plan to overview both the past and the future of evolution. The book cover I'm showing here is for those who might wish to delve into this topic deeper. I'm going to try to orient this to people who might just have a little bit of understanding of anthroposophy. So, in high school physics and chemistry courses, we learned that there are four states of matter. Let's take an example, an ice cube. Water, as ice, is solid. Then, as that ice warms, it melts to a liquid. If we continue to heat this liquid, it becomes steam and can exist in the air. When we warm elements much further, they come to the state called plasma. These four states relate to the four elements that are foundational even to ancient philosophers: earth, water, air, and fire. The anthroposophical view of physical evolution follows this progression, that is, starting with warmth or fire, then the addition of air, then the addition of water, and now with the addition of earth, the solid. Interestingly, in September of 2025, it was reported by scientists that the earth is the only planet in our solar system with fire. What? The sun doesn't have fire? No, the sun actually is not burning with fire. And these scientists concluded that fire, which needs oxygen and fuel plus warmth, can only exist where there is life. Think about that, and you'll see it's true. In the model of the ancients, fire belongs not only to the physical, but also to the higher sets of states, those found in living things or etheric states, namely the warmth ether, the light ether, the tone ether, and the life ether. We'll not have time to properly explain these four ethers or describe them, unfortunately, but they all play a role wherever there is a living being. Etheric activity comes from the periphery inward. Okay, so forces that you know of, earthly forces and all, like gravity, seem to be coming from a center outward or pulling in as different than these etheric forces. So, an etheric force, for example, from the periphery, you can say pulls on a seedling to rise up into the sunshine. In fact, sunshine itself is a etheric force containing all four of these ethers. We are going to take a short detour into physics in order to explain briefly the question, what is matter? When I was in high school playing sports, I was proud of the solidity of my body. I dismissed the fact that over 70% of my body was water. Now, when one looks through a microscope at a stationary object, say a piece of wood, one sees something remarkable. The object is composed of molecules, and all of these are moving. Not one molecule is stationary. Here you see a computer simulation applied by scientists to enhance their images. If we peer through a more powerful microscope, we can see inside a molecule. For example, water. We find it is composed of vibrating atoms. In this case, water has two hydrogen atoms bonded with one oxygen atom. When we study these vibrating atoms, we find that some seem to be identical in certain properties. I just mentioned hydrogen and oxygen. The periodic table you see here lists the various elements or atoms. Each has a different atomic weight based on the number of protons, neutrons, in electrons that it contains. Now, a Russian scientist named Dmitry Mendeleev created the first periodic table in 1869. His table listed 63 known elements by atomic weight and their chemical properties. Mendeleev left gaps in his table for undiscovered elements, which he expected, and these were later discovered. Remarkable. His original table had 8 columns to align with the octave in music. Interestingly, 8 still plays a role in understanding atomic interactions, in that there are thought to be up to 5 shells or spheres in which electrons can exist. Each shell has a maximum number of electrons. The first shell can have up to 2 electrons, the second up to that great number 8. The third shell can have 2 plus 8 plus 2. 2 plus 8 plus 8, or 18 electrons. The normal way this is stated is that the higher shells have a maximum of 2 times the shell number squared, so that in this case, the fourth shell can have 2 times 4 squared, or 32 electrons maximum in its outer shell. Each electron, now, hopefully I'm not boring you. This was high school chemistry for many of you, and it was probably brutal for you back then. Now, each electron has a negative charge. So for it to be held by that nucleus, the nucleus must have an equal positive charge. And that's where the protons come in. They have a positive charge to match the sum of negative charges from all of its electrons. So if you've got 5 electrons, you've got 5 protons. There are also particles in the nucleus that have no charge, and these are called neutrons. Okay, never mind. But the sum of the weight of all of these particles gives an element its atomic weight. Now let's look through an even more powerful microscope to see what's inside these vibrating atoms. This image shows the atomic structure of a particular lattice, PrSCO3, with individual atoms appearing as bright vibrating spots. So obviously this is a static picture. If we were to see it as a video, these would all be vibrating. Nothing is stable here at the so-called atomic level. Peering in even deeper becomes problematic because to see what's going on, we need to bombard the object with light. We call them photons, that then can be reflected back to us so we can see what's going on there. But this light that we use to bombard and reflect back changes such tiny objects that we're looking at, as well as changing its path of movement. We dramatically affect the object we're looking at by looking at it. After a few decades of attempting such observations, scientists concluded that subatomic particles are not truly particles, in that they do not have 3 dimensions or other properties that particles have. We might call them building blocks for atoms, but even this concept implies blocks as matter. The important takeaway is that matter at this level shows itself to be an illusion. It is actually a matrix of forces that give an object its solidity. There's no solidity there when we look inside it. It's vibrating, and the amount of space what we're looking at here actually takes up is so tiny You wonder how it is that anything feels solid. Well, the reason why it feels solid is because there's a matrix of forces there. Really? What are forces? There are many forces. Okay, what is a force? Well, we talk about them, but we actually don't know what a force is. Could a force be what a spiritual or elemental being is doing? Are forces the activities of spiritual or elemental beings? We know that there is both matter and antimatter. Scientists have shown that equal particles of matter and antimatter can be created out of nothing. This is called the Schwinger effect. Given matter and antimatter, could there also be space and anti-space? Huh. Steiner once said that the inside of the sun is negative space, but this has not yet been explored. How could we? Are we going to send some kind of rocket ship into the sun that can survive all that heat? Could creation in the physical come out of nothing? Remember the Big Bang? Certainly, if what's created is a combination of equal polarities so that when it's recombined, it returns to nothing. So I can have so much of this and so much of anti this, and when I put them together, it goes back to nothing. But while these polarities existed, was not its spiritual creator existing in them? When something dies or ceases to exist, does its spiritual continue to exist? Now, at this point, anthroposophy can sound an awful lot like creationism. But let's continue. For both polarities to remain within creation, there must be a separator. This is what the caduceus, or the staff of Mercury, shows us, these two snakes and then a separator, this bar in the middle. In physics, we peer into matter, molecules, atoms, subatomic particles that are dimensionless. Matter proves itself to be an illusion. Then why does my hand stop at a wall? Again, we heard forces. And are forces something spiritual? Okay, we'll leave this question for now. Let's go from physics to astronomy. In astrophysics, there is a branch called metallicity that theorizes on how it is that we find heavy metals on our Earth. It claims that following the Big Bang, there came into existence the first few elements found in that periodic chart, namely hydrogen and helium. From this, the first stars were born. Each star went through its stellar evolution that concluded with a supernova. These supernovas fuse together some of these existing elements into the next stage. The next stage would have been from heat to gases, meaning carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, and neon. Then a new star formed using these gases. It went through its stellar evolution and later exploded as a supernova. And this so-called period 3 set of elements, namely sodium, magnesium, aluminum, silicon, phosphorus, sulfur, chlorine, argon, and so on, came into existence. And in metallicity, they theorize that perhaps some period 4 elements, potassium and calcium, perhaps, also came into existence. Then, and these were water soluble. Another star formed, evolved, and became a supernova. This last supernova then formed the metals, titanium, copper, iron, and so forth. Yes, cadmium, antimony, gold, mercury, lead, uranium, very heavy metals. We might ask, what might be formed from the next supernova of our existing sun? Well, this picture shows the anthroposophical view that we just heard from metallicity. So we also show here 3 prior cosmic conditions, or what Steiner called planetary conditions. And these were evolutionary steps towards what we call Earth today, a step towards the physical. So there was not physical when we began in old Saturn. Matter, if we can call it as such, would be first in a plasma state. Then it became gaseous in old sun there, then liquid in old moon, and finally it could appear only on Earth evolution as solid. Each cosmic condition, even though they were very different, had spiritual beings who evolved within its conditions. The beings who are now the archai would have been on the human stage of what is called ancient Saturn. Similarly, under new and different conditions, what are today the archangels were upon the human stage of this ancient sun condition. Today's angels were upon the human stage of ancient moon. And it is us who develop now upon the human stage of Earth. What were we during old Saturn? To its humans, that is today's archai, we were similarly below them as the solid, that is the rock, is beneath us. On ancient sun, we were akin to the plant kingdom. On ancient moon, we were akin to the animal kingdom. On earth, we've entered the human stage, and thereby we received our I am, or what's called the ego. Of these 3 prior cosmic or planetary conditions, each had a mission, and there were spiritual beings who administered its evolution. And you see here their names. Earth evolution is administered by, in Hebrew, the Elohim, or in Greek, the Exousiai. Old Moon, administered by the next higher beings called the Dynamis in Greek, and it became the cosmos of wisdom. Each has had its own drama. The laggards of old sun are called Ahriman. The laggards of old moon, Lucifer. The mission of earth is to become the cosmos of love. As we experience a world woven in wisdom, so when you go outside, nature shows itself as being woven in wisdom. The beings of the next cosmic condition after Earth will experience a world woven in love, but a love based on wisdom. When we explore evolution, we typically need to agree on a set of assumptions. Science assumes evolution began with the Big Bang. That's an assumption. Energy began to rapidly change into first light and then matter. Well, hydrogen and helium at first, as we heard. So, when the Big Bang occurred, did spiritual beings already exist? In the beginning, the Logos was. If yes, then were we, us humans, spiritual beings created by God who became through this Logos? Was the Big Bang the creation? Did the Logos already exist at the beginning? According to John, yes. Our current assumption of science is that life evolved by sheer accident out of the physical. Here, anthroposophy would say the opposite. It would ask, can there be life without physical bodies? Now let's go back to the Big Bang. And from that, we get the equation E equals mc squared. We never seem to ask, what is that E? Energy. We know it has no dimensions and that it fills no space. And it also seems to ignore time. Could energy be roughly the same thing as spirit? Could we say that spirit equals mc squared? Early Christianity struggled with the concept of the Trinity. As we heard, the Gospel of John begins in the primal beginning, the Logos was. Time has a beginning. So the Logos is above time because it already was. Is it also above space, the Logos above space and its three dimensions? All things became through him. Did God create or speak the comprehensive living concept, the Logos, and all things then became through this Logos? According to John, yes. If so, this means that the Logos is the archetype of all things. Who decided the multitude of forms, from crystals to plants to animals to humans? Is there a God of form? Yes. In Greek, that's the exousiai, or Hebrew Elohim. They are the God of form. Is our form something that exists spiritually then? Yes. From this perspective, the origin of all things does seem to be the Logos. Is this also energy? All things were once part of the stream to bring about humanity on Earth that began with old Saturn. Out of this stream, the mineral kingdom was pushed out. Later, the plant kingdom, then the animal kingdom. Thus, the minerals have only form. Later, because we were given life on old sun, and then we pushed out the plants, they have not only form, but form and life. And likewise, the animals from old moon have consciousness. As we humans descended into the earthly, did we ingest in some way the physical so that our form became visible within the physical realm? Yes. Given that today we only sense what is physical, naturally, today we only consider real what is physical. Anthroposophy dares to say whatever is physical has spiritual behind it as its reality. Interestingly, as we peer into matter with microscopes, you've heard, matter disappears. Matter, we have to realize, as illusion. What gives matter its solidity? Again, these forces we've been talking about. Forces that we can say belong to either spiritual beings or elemental beings. This downward facing parabola is often used as a diagram for evolution from an anthroposophical perspective. We humans have descended from a spiritual existence into a physical earthly existence. We are right about here today, This U-shaped diagram depicts what the Elohim had planned, but because we had to develop freedom, thanks to Lucifer, this upwards ascent is no longer a given. If we ascend, we will individually come to our own Easter moment when we can leave the physical behind and continue life with our etheric body as our lowest bodily member. It is now well established that during a near-death experience, one perceives a panorama of their life. This panorama exists in this life realm, this etheric. It remains in the etheric realm after death. In Hinduism, this is known as part of the Akashic record, where life's experiences are recorded. The Greek word used in John's Gospel is Zoe, Z-O-E, or life. It says, in him, Zoe is. This is what anthroposophy calls the etheric. Here lies everyone's memories. Those receiving organ transplants often report on memories that could not be their own. These memories, you see, are not in the brain. To know about evolution, we must know what came first. Do we? The chicken or the egg? Aristotle pondered this and came to the idea of first cause, which would be an eternal, perfect, yet uncaused being that initiated all motion and change in the universe without being moved itself. This unmoved mover of Aristotle has some similarities to the concept of the logos used in John's prologue, as well as the works of other philosophers of that time. In John, we read, all things became through him. Perhaps we should take up a similar question. What came first, the living or the lifeless? And we should then ask, have both of these evolved? How do we know anything about evolution? Thought becomes theory. Theory is then tested over and over again. When theory passes the required set of tests, then it can be deemed to be a fact. It is accepted when multiple exhaustive tests all get the same result. Therefore, repeatability. But how do we test? Today's methods for testing include measure, count, and weight. These are all based only on material existence that we already saw was illusion. How could one establish repeatability with something that is spiritual? This is a question for anthroposophical scientists. If what is spiritual is alive and evolving, can it still attain repeatability? Theories on evolution are evolving, even as our testing methods are evolving. This diagram can serve as an overview of evolution according to anthroposophy, and it was put together by Aaron Fried Pfeiffer. It shows the four preceding epochs of Earth evolution and how the spiritual world prepared us for our earthly vehicle. So I said the four preceding epochs of Earth evolution. We've heard of the four preceding cosmic conditions. So these epochs you see here are recapitulating those prior cosmic conditions. Now remember metallicity. Anthroposophy claims that before Earth there were these three prior cosmic conditions. And here you see them recapitulated. So for example, the Lemurian epoch you see at the end there recapitulated moon, whose environment was like a peat bog, full of life in the vast wetness. During these recapitulations, many beings found conditions on Earth to be just what they needed for their evolution. A catastrophe struck at the end of each of these epochs. Now, Earth, so we can say in each of these epochs, there's a kind of mini evolution that took place. So you have a beginning, you've got a whole evolution, a whole set of living forms, and then a catastrophe that brought it to an end. Now, Earth evolution was, you can see, the Atlantean epic is now the first to be fully about Earth. A hardening process only comes about during the Atlantean epic. And by the middle of the Atlantean epic, firm ground begins to appear. The balance of life and death then was met at this time in the Atlantean epic. The spiritual stream of evolution had been a descent into this physical. To exist upon the physical, humans, like the animals before them, had to have its body prepared for them by the spiritual world. I should mention that within each of these epochs you see here are seven, what Strander calls cultural ages. Since time itself has evolved, we cannot assign dates to these ages, nor to these epochs. And I'll make some comments about time and dates in a moment. We are now past the midpoint and well into the post-Atlantean epoch, or the fifth epoch. Later in this talk, I'll talk about the future epochs. I'll read this recent news story, quote, "This skull changes a lot of thinking because it suggests about 1 million years ago, our ancestors had already split into distinct groups, pointing to a much earlier and more complex human evolutionary split than previously believed," end quote. That's from the study's co-author, Chris Stringer, a paleoanthropologist and research leader in human evolution at London's Natural History Museum. The results significantly shift the timeline for species such as our own, that is, Homo sapiens, as well as for Neanderthals and Neanderthalensis and Denisovans and potentially other archaic humans. For more on paleontology and anthroposophy, I recommend the work of the Natural Science section, whose annual conference this year is open to all of you and will be in College Park, Maryland, April 30th to May 3rd. And they sponsor a monthly webinar starting back in January on evolution. And its next one will be March 28th. So if you want to get more on this, or if you can't remember what I just told you, and no problem, go to the website you see there, the naturalsciencesection.org. So, and I am not a paleontologist, so I'm not going to go much into paleontology or dating methods. I will just make a quick comment that the Earth's rotation speed has not always been the same. And in fact, 24 hours is no longer the time it takes the Earth to revolve. It's a little bit different. Not much, a little. And the moon, we'll talk about the moon. We can talk about the Earth's orbit around the sun. So the things that we denote as time, meaning the length of a day, the length of a month, the length of a year, even the length of an hour, have all changed during evolution. One of the great achievements of the past century was Einstein's theory of relativity. Given relativity, we can ask, does light experience time? No, light does not. Let's look at an example. You look up at the night sky and you see a star. Let's say it's 500 light years away. Now imagine that you are that photon from that star that just landed in someone's retina. For how long did that photon experience itself traveling through space? The answer may surprise you because for the photon, it went directly from its creation to that person's retina. There was no time. There was no space it traveled through. For this photon, if such a thing exists, its journey was instantaneous. Let's ask, has time evolved? I just mentioned a few things, but we think of time in sort of three dimensions: past, present, and future. We can also think of time as duration or eternity and what's temporal. We know that time flies when you're having fun, and when you're depressed, it goes very slowly. Psychological time is obviously quite different from measured time. But has time been measured the same in every century? And I gave you examples why no. The sundial was invented to determine the time of day. To show the time of day. Later, a sand clock was invented to measure an hour. Then this measurement needed or became a clock with gears and springs. And today, we've decided and come to atomic clocks. And it's based on the rate of atomic decay, which is also used to try to date things. But has atomic decay always been the same since the Big Bang? Probably not. Recently, we have found reasons to question that. So what we do is often like looking at a 7-year-old child who is evolving, growing up, and taking certain data from it over, say, 6 months of the 7-year-old child's life, and then projecting it out 25 years, 250 years, or even further, or going backwards in a child's life that many years. So, who is subject to evolution? Humans certainly are. What of us evolves? Just our physical body? Have our senses also evolved over time? Did the ancient Greeks see colors the same way we do? They did not see blue as we do. What about our soul and its functions, thinking, feeling, and willing? Has there also been an evolution of consciousness? Do the animals evolve? If not, why not? What's missing in them for them to evolve if they don't? And if they do evolve, then do plants? What about the elements of the periodic chart? And do spiritual beings evolve? Does God evolve? A recent announcement from NASA said that samples from the asteroid Bennu reveal that the building blocks of life, and thus the potentiality for consciousness, existed in space long before Earth was formed. This statement shows that the concept of consciousness by natural science does not yet allow for consciousness to exist without a physical brain. But we know, as we heard about near-death experiences, that consciousness continues even when the medical instruments show the brain to be dead. From his letters to members, this would be GA 26, Steiner offered this. The living organization, the thinking organization is an organization of the stars. If it lived and expressed itself as such alone, man would bear within him not a consciousness of self, but a consciousness of the gods. The thinking organization is, however, lifted out of the cosmos of the stars and transplanted into the realm of earthly processes. Man becomes a self-conscious being in that he experiences the world of stars within the earthly realm. Here, therefore, we have the region of the inner life of man, where the spiritual divine world, united with a human being, sets him free in order that he may become man in the fullest sense. Are there other beings without physical bodies who do have a consciousness? Anthroposophy's view of the spiritual world largely agrees with that described in early Christianity by Dionysius the Areopagite. He was a student of St. Paul. His name became the title for the leader of the school of Athens. Hence, the later authors of books from the school describing these spiritual beings, they were all called Dionysius. But then academia used the label pseudo-Dionysius. Overall, the hierarchy was arranged into 3 sub-hierarchies, each with 3 sub-levels, thereby making up a hierarchy of 9 levels, hence the term Cloud 9. Our destiny is to become the 10th in this hierarchy. Now let us consider how complicated human nature is on Earth. Spiritual science speaks about human nature as having 4 members. First, the outer visible physical body. Secondly, the etheric or life body. Then the astral body. And fourthly, the human ego as the central or inner human being. Our physical body, the same in it, the same forces and substances are present which are in the physical world outside. In our etheric body lies what imbues these physical substances with life. This etheric body is akin to the plant kingdom. Our astral body we have in common with the animals. It is the bearer of our life of feeling, of desires, pleasures, or its opposite, joys or pains. Of the beings of earth, it is only us humans who have an ego, and this makes us the crown of earthly creation. The centaur is a mythological image of what we have evolved out of. Well, actually, we are still evolving out of. That is our inner animal nature within our astral body. Often people today speak of a physical and a spiritual part of the human. Anthroposophy speaks of a threefoldness, body, soul, and spirit. This agrees with the writings of St. Paul, who said the human is soma, psyche, and pneuma. In evolution, the body evolves towards multiplicity to be the earthly vehicle of the individual. The body is subject to death. The spirit evolves slowly towards unity to become, as St. Paul said, the Christ in me, that is, the universal I am, which is eternal. The soul mediates between the two, between the temporal and the eternal, between the passing moment and duration. Let's look at this incredible human body. It consists of trillions of self-sufficient cells. These can be thought of as independent living beings working together. How is it possible that they function so well together. How does selflessness come about in forming this totality? None of our cells operate in an egoistic manner. Rather, all work in a harmonious way. What causes the cooperation of these small cells? A higher being expresses itself through those tiny living beings. The human soul interfaces with the body. The soul sees with the cells of the eye, thinks with the cells of the brain, lives in the cells of the blood. Here we can see what community signifies. Union, common unity, means that a higher being brings about the unified nature of its members. A guild of humans working together receive an archangel to be their group's soul. When two or more are gathered in my name, this gives us a picture of the future of our evolution, of humanity overcoming our egoism, forming associations to eventually become the body of Christ. What the human soul, as a human soul, what are we aware of today? We know that we can think, feel, and will. These are three functions of the soul. Now, many of us have heard this date, 869 AD, the Eighth Ecumenical Council, and this middle diagram was considered. From much earlier times to them, the soul was considered the mediator between one's spirit and body. Remember what Paul had to say. Apparently, some took this to mean that we have two souls, a spiritual soul and a bodily soul. The Eighth Ecumenical Council declared that we have only one soul and that it operates only within the body. In many ways, with the evolution of the consciousness and the growth of materialism, this was true to their human perception and conception at that time. But this new picture of the human left out the spirit. Now, for our further evolution, this middle picture must return, must become that goal. We need to have it return that we have both, and then we have to bring them into integration. Here you see the middle of this diagram, the three main steps of our soul evolution. We work together with our angels to develop sentient soul from about 3000 BC into the Greco-Roman age, when we began to work on our intellectual soul, that is from about 750 BCE to about 1400 AD. And from the Renaissance into our times, we are working on the consciousness soul. Our ego is capable of transforming things. This enables it to be used for the greatest good or the worst evil. At this time in evolution, its role is to begin to transform our astral into spirit self or manas. In the next age, beginning in about 3600 AD, the ego only begins to work on transforming one's etheric into life spirit or buddhi. And in the last age of this current fifth epoch, from roughly 5700 to 7900 AD, the ego begins to work on the physical to make spirit man or Atman. This transformative work begins during Earth and will continue into those future cosmic conditions, namely Jupiter, Venus, and Vulcan. Now you can get a glimpse of how the human reflects the 3x3 spiritual hierarchy in our body, soul, and spirit. I have mentioned that the spirits of form, the Elohim or Exousiai, have a goal for human evolution, and that is that we become the spirits of love and freedom. This means that our love will evolve to become agape love, while our thinking becomes free, becomes a living thinking that shines. In him is life. This life is the light of men. We must become enlightened. We become the 10th hierarchy when or if we achieve this goal. After Earth will be the cosmic condition called Jupiter. There we are destined to be the angels for those who will be upon the human stage of Jupiter. The earthly animal-like forms of the human, which gradually developed in the course of human evolution into our present form, together with the faculties which we already had at that time, came about because our spiritual entity was originally more perfect, not in terms of intellect, but in terms of imagination, than it is today. This original perfection was due to the fact that humans were not free. We were possessed by the Spirit. Intellect enabled us to become free. Now, an intelligence bereft of spirituality has taken root among us. Imaginative work can be done, but only when the mood for it is there. When the imaginative mood seizes a poet, that poet can write a poem down at once. And that's how it was in the case of primeval humans. They were never able to do things out of free will. Free will gradually developed, but not wisdom. Wisdom was originally greater than free will. Now it must regain its greatness. That means we have to come back to the Spirit by way of the intellect, to return to the Spirit precisely in full possession of the intellect, with the intellect now fully alive. Anthroposophy has nothing at all against the intellect. Rather, the point is that we have to go forward with it. Originally, human beings had spirit without intellect. Then the spirit gradually fell away or drew away, and the intellect increased. Now, by means of the intellect, we have to regain the spirit. And with the spirit regained, if only partially, then brotherhood, not out of blood or race, but real brotherhood can develop, and this will lead to our goal of agape love. So, to summarize, the evolution of consciousness may be traced from an initial state where man still felt himself part of the divine spiritual order, down through the ages of increasing separation to the present stage where we learn to feel ourselves as an individuality detached from divine spiritual being and able to make use of our own thoughts. Now, I mentioned an evolution of consciousness. In earlier periods of human evolution, souls received much because they were still in their infancy and accepted religious traditions and ideas about the spiritual world in a childlike manner. As a result, they possessed a language for the spiritual life and were able to live in communion. But today, we have to begin this process of evolution, and I've been of the ascent evolution. And at the same time that this is enabled for us, but we have to do it, we are also sliding down because of our technology into the realm of Ahriman, into subnature. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. Just as there has been an evolution of consciousness, so has there been an evolution of art. Art precedes. With the Renaissance came the fruits of the intellectual soul development that brought 3D perspective to a 2D canvas. Art moved from painting pictures from spiritual experiences to painting pictures of what moved the soul when it perceived within the physical realm. We are now approaching a time when artists will begin, poorly at first, to attempt to depict the supersensible nature of humans. The artist will no longer see the subject as a combination of bones, muscles, blood, etc., but as an image of an eternal spiritual being. Ancient texts also speak about time periods. Many of you know these Hindu terms that refer to four prior ages or yugas: Krita or golden, Treta or silver, Dvapara or third or sometimes called Bronze Age, and Kali or Dark Age. According to Wikipedia, Kali Yuga began in 3101 BCE and will last 432,000 years. Different texts and different interpreters have led to quite different assessments of how long each of these ages last. Now, Wikipedia is written by some humans, and some get to be the chief editors. Those of you who've read Wikipedia on anthroposophy know that its contents are not written by anthroposophists. So take all of this and Wikipedia with a grain of salt. Rudolf Steiner used not 432,000, but 5,000 years for Kali Yuga, 10,000 for that Bronze Age, 15,000 for Treta Yuga, and 20,000 for Krita Yuga. Steiner agreed, though, with 3101 BC for the start of Kali Yuga, but he placed its ending at 1899. He called the next age that began in 1899 the age of spiritual science. You can see ages are becoming shorter and shorter. As such, we can say time is speeding up. I'm sure many of you feel this speeding up of time. And so, what does this mean for the time between death and birth? In the past, in general, one would incarnate once as a man and once as a woman during each cultural age that you see depicted by this similar chart. But in his karma lectures, Rudolf Steiner indicated that because of changes to human attributes and to the need to address karma, the common time between incarnations has shrunk to about 700 years now. You see 7 cultural ages in our 5th great epoch here depicted. Each age has a spiritual impulse. The great epic of previous time was the Atlantean, and a deluge brought that continent to its end. And people migrated. And I think I should try to bring this to a close. I don't have my watch here. Um, I think it's 4:05. Yeah, so I do need to come to a close right quickly, but I would just like to say with this one that we can see in here, if you try to picture what each of these previous ages was like for the human being, a evolution of consciousness. And when we look ahead towards this last cultural age, its duty is to bring this 5th epic to a close. It will be the time foreseen in Matthew 25 and in Revelations, when a second fall will occur and human beings will divide into the good or evil races. We understand the work of the ego only when we are clear that a man is subject to reincarnation. All during earthly life, we alternate between awake and asleep. When we sleep, our ego and astral bodies separate from our other bodies, etheric and physical, and they venture into the spiritual world. Long ago, people could remember what happened during sleep, but for the development of our freedom, This had to be withdrawn along with the spiritual world. Thus, in the time of Daniel, dream interpretation was very important. By the Middle Ages, one could retain only the dream they had upon waking. Now, evolution is restoring some retention of what happens while we sleep, such as in lucid dreaming. Whenever a new epic begins, the previous ones are recapitulated. We can see this in a child. They have 7-year cycles: change of teeth, puberty, adulthood. Birth is a recapitulation of the deluge. Then, through childhood, we recapitulate the cultural ages of the post Atlantean epic. If we had time to work this out, we would find that a fifth grader is recapitulating ancient Greece. It is healthy for the child that it recapitulates these ages at the right age. So in Waldorf schools, we do the Olympics when they're fifth graders. Given this, should we consider it unhealthy for a child to have their own smartphone at this age, or an AI device now? When human evolution began, there were 7 Elohim who made the human in their image. In the Hyperborean epic, 6 of the 7 Elohim, along with other beings, left Earth to form the sun. One Elohim, Yahweh or Jehovah, remained to guide humanity. Another Elohim, not one of these 7, but a laggard one, whose evolution on Old Moon was not complete, he also remained. This was Lucifer, whose impact on evolution caused the fall. In the next epic, Lemuria, the fall, that is, into physical Earth, was underway during Lemuria. Humanity incarnated into bodies first composed of air, and they breathed fire, but they continued. But going further was very difficult, for they met the hardening forces. And for many humans, this was too much for them. And they did their evolutionary progress on other planets until the Atlantean time, until things were fixed. Some of the things that had to be fixed on Earth was to withdraw some of these hardening forces. And that was what Yahweh did in withdrawing the moon with these hardening forces. And with that, evolution was able to be slowed down. It also meant a separation into the sexes, not only for humans, but also for the animals, or most of the animals. Some remained androgynous, which we were before this time. Because this was a spiritual impulse during the Lemurian time, the third epic, it must come to a completion in this, the fifth epic. Thus, the moon must return before the sixth epic can begin. And also, sexual procreation must end before the next cultural age begins. That is, before the year 6000. And people laughed at Steiner when he said the moon came from the Earth. But it was established by testing moon rocks that we brought back from the moon to prove that the moon did come from the Earth. Current theory claims that there must have been a collision with a smaller planet called, they gave it a name, even Theia, and this caused the ejection of all the material that has become the moon. Steiner also predicted that something would alter the moon's orbit around the year 6000 so that it could gradually spin back in and unite with the Earth around the year 8000. And of course, that would be the catastrophe that ends this current epic. Before the cosmic condition of Earth began, as we saw, there were 3 prior, and these agree with metallicity, or metallicity agrees with them. As each prior cosmic condition, and we'll take Old Moon, for example, was beginning its evolution, the Godhead directed some of Old Moon's administrators, that is the dynamis, to become gods of hindrances. Now, there's great wisdom contained in this birth of the gods of hindrances, and that their work evolved into the evil that we face today. Each of these prior cosmic conditions, there were beings who lagged behind. I mentioned these in a way. The laggards of old moon are the Luciferic beings of today. The Ahrimanic beings are the laggards of old sun. And those of old Saturn are called the Asuras. Each of these act in our times as a necessary evil for our evolution, but also for their evolution. If not for those dynamis who took on the role of the gods of hindrances, then there would be no room for evil in our times. Until these laggards are brought into contact with human evolution, they sought a separate evolution. Lucifer, as an Elohim, albeit a laggard Elohim, was allowed by the higher beings to be in Eden, full well knowing that Lucifer would have a successful temptation of humans, causing then our fall, causing Earth evolution to be changed, causing the Elohim to have to bring in Ahriman to balance out the effects of Lucifer. Wow, I consider that brilliant on the part of the dynamis and especially the spirits of wisdom, the Kyriates. The demarcation of the senses into 7 and 5 is like seeing the starry sky when the sun rises in Aries, with 7 constellations above the horizon and 5 hidden behind. Now, we should ask the question, okay, we have these 5 senses of sight, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching, and we have these other 7. How will these evolve? Have they evolved? We heard that the Greeks see blue differently today. So it's another question of evolution. What's going to change in the future? Will Christ step in to help change these as he has done in the past? Or are we now responsible for that evolution? So Steiner made this sculpture here to show the activity of Christ between Lucifer and Ahriman. And here you can see some of the gestures of Lucifer and some of those of Ahriman. Remember, you sit in the throne of consciousness for your entity. You have a Luciferic and you have an Ahrimanic double, and they are constantly whispering to you whenever you're making a deliberation. As long as you sit in that throne, you make the decision. But you can abdicate this throne through drugs or alcohol. And in our time, Ahriman easily works through those humans whose consciousness has become clouded and is not fully awake or within their possession. So you see this progression from Lucifer, incarnation, to Christ, to Ahriman, and this sliding down in order to meet Ahriman in his realm. And Steiner says to us that mankind, that Lucifer tries to prevent mankind from diving down into that sphere where the Ahrimanic power must be overcome. Steiner tells us that given our times and our technology, we are sliding down into this Ahrimanic sphere of subnature. And it might sound ugly and frightful, but for the future Jupiter, this is a task we must do. Christ will give us the strength to do so if we are able to rise up into supernature in equal proportions, that is, into the etheric realm. Thus, we will have the balance to our sliding down into subnature. Another quote from the Gospel of St. John: men speak of good and evil, but they do not know that it is necessary in the great plan that evil too should come to its peals, in order that those who have to overcome it should, in the very overcoming of evil, so use their force that a still greater good results from it. It will be possible to find Christ in the world immediately above ours when humanity shall have become sufficiently ripe, which we are doing now. It will not be possible in the future to find Christ in the physical world, but only in the world immediately above, for human beings will not always remain the same. And since the mystery of Golgotha, the human etheric body has held something that is no longer subject to death. And this something does not die with the rest. That which we gradually achieve through the influence of the Christ impulse then streams out into cosmic space and creates this kind of sphere around the earth, an etheric radiance. This will become stronger and stronger as more and more humans reach the point of being able to leave their physical bodies behind because they have developed a consciousness within their and of their etheric bodies. Can we develop a heaven on earth? What would that be? No war, of course. Everybody gets along. The temperature will be just how I want it. Every day will be beautiful and no rain, relaxing, careless, and peaceful. And robots will do all the work. In such an environment, will there still be evolution? Of course not. So this timeline shows you a summary of what I've been talking about with a little picture looking ahead. As we heard, Matthew 25 talks about a separation into sheep and goats, into the good and evil. We can see the period on the top here of when ascension can begin, sort of in the middle of the sixth post-Atlantean cultural age, or the so-called Slavic age. And then in the American or seventh cultural age, we will no longer have bodies that come through sexual procreation. We will have bodies that are neither born nor die. They will be bodies that our harmonic double will help us to develop. Very mechanized bodies, which our soul will hover above. And then you can see the date when the war of all against all happens, the second fall happens, and then the moon returns. Those who follow this second fall, meaning our harmonic doubles and the humans of the evil race, will be put into the eighth sphere. And I also want to suggest that a human being named Mani will volunteer to go with those who have to go to the eighth sphere to get to Jupiter. So speaking of Jupiter, I've shown this diagram earlier. There will be three more cosmic conditions after Earth, so they make this U-shaped diagram. It is our goal to become the spirits of love and freedom, who will act as the angels for those who will be upon the human stage of the next cosmic condition called Jupiter. And after Jupiter comes Venus and then Vulcan. And please don't confuse these names with the names of the planets in our solar system. These are esoteric names. And there will be, as I mentioned, beings that must go the path of the eighth sphere to Jupiter. And so from this perspective, I call the eighth sphere an act of God's mercy. So it is our cosmic duty to complete those spiritual impulses that came from spiritual beings earlier. It will be gifts from Ahriman's incarnation that we will have to wrest from him to be used later to get us through our future difficult periods. In the beginning, the Logos was. John 1, all the verbs are in the past tense. This implies we've been going through evolution. He says, and the darkness comprehended it not. So later in evolution, even the darkness will comprehend the light. So this brings us to an end. And as a closing verse, I wanted to share this. The stars once spoke to man. It is world destiny that they are silent now. To be aware of the silence can become pain for earthly man. But in the deepening silence, there grows and ripens what mankind speaks to the stars. To be aware of the speaking can become strength for spirit man. And I've also put the Natural Science section's website and dates up here for you. And so over to you, Aliodor. And I'm sorry I ran a little over.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I always, when we get to when I saw the words, the last words with the stars, it's always such emotion that it brings to me. When I first heard them from you in, I think it was 2022, in one of our study groups, it really spoke to me and gave me such enthusiasm for the future. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. It gave a lot of information and it brought a lot of things together for me, and I'm sure for our guests also. And I do have here some questions that were asked. Firstly, I wanted to give you a chance to drink some water and maybe catch your breath because it was indeed a long presentation. For the start, I wanted to say that the recordings of the webinar will be available in a few days on the mistec.org website. So be without, how do you call it in English? I forgot the word in English, without hesitation. So you can find it. And a question that came and for me, it's also a question that stayed in my head for quite some years. When we become angels for the next beings, is technology an opportunity to work towards this goal now as guides?
So when I mention that, if I understand the question correctly, we can ask, are the beings who will be on the human stage of Jupiter here with us now in some way? Steiner
Yes,
mentioned, Steiner mentioned that we were amongst those who were on the human stage of the prior cosmic condition called Old Moon, who are today's angels. When they were on the human stage, we entered it, and we were really horrible beings of hindrances to them. We came up from below and we brought hindrances. The beings who will be on the human stage of Jupiter, likewise in the second half of Earth evolution, which is now, have come up from below, and they are here with us. And if they're not the Ahrimanic double, they're right there with the Ahrimanic double. And so we can say that either the Ahrimanic double or these beings who are right there in our consciousness, holding hands with our Ahrimanic double or our Ahrimanic double, are what will be on the human stage, that we will be of Jupiter, that we will be their angels. So our angels are going to stick with us wherever we go in our evolution. They are totally committed to us. They are our guardian angels. We will have to do likewise. So our angels entered human bodies at a certain point in evolution. We will need to, when they are humans on Jupiter, to be able to enter their bodies. Maybe not as full incarnations, but we will need to incorporate into those bodies. We will know how to be in those bodies. And hence, the technology we are experiencing today will be of immense benefit for us in that future time. The problem for us is it is also the preparation for Ahriman's incarnation. And it can take us way too far, too quickly into subnature. How do we judge if it's too quickly? How do we judge if it's too far? And I'm going to offer that we don't know today. But so it behooves us to do as much as we can in our lives to feel our own balance. Am I balanced? Am I becoming addicted to my cell phone, my social media, and so on, and these sort of things? So I hope that answers the question. If not,
I'm sure it does. For me, it was very enlightening, and thank you for that. I see that we have some more questions incoming. One of this would be, what do you think will happen to the whole tech, computer, electronic aspect of our world of today, of now?
okay, good question. Um, we are here right now doing something that if we were adept in etheric wherewithal, knowledge, experience, we wouldn't need Zoom. We could do this in the etheric realm. So what we develop in technology today is a kind of foreshadowing, a kind of mimicking of what's possible in the etheric. And so at some point in the future, Steiner points out that we'll realize we actually don't need this technology anymore. We are, when we become so aware in the etheric, then we can do that there. And by the way, that's the topic for the Mystech conference this summer. Last year was the incarnation of Ahriman. This
Oh,
summer, it's becoming aware of the etheric. No, that's fine.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Right.
Um,
So,
another
um,
question.
and I'm just going to add a little bit to that because I see a question. How close is this to a Keeley machine? It's not um, that close. But what I can say here is that Steiner wants for us in this time frame, and especially for the West, to develop this third. There's three occultisms in the East: a eugenic, in the middle, a hygienic, in the West, a mechanical occultism. And part of that mechanical occultism is what Keeley, in a sense, was trying to achieve. It's an interpenetration, just as light and dark's interpenetration brings about color, something new will come about from the interpenetration of the moral and the mechanical. And that um, is part of what he calls this mechanical occultism. And it will be machines that only respond to a moral impulse. Where does a moral impulse, how could it do that? It's not going to use the Bible. It's what happens is that from our higher eye comes a moral impulse. And that stirs our astral body. That stirring of the astral body, putting it in motion, creates vibrations in the etheric body. And normally that gets it then performs physical actions using the physical body. What Steiner was hoping in this age we could develop then is a machine that's nearby can resonate with those etheric vibrations. And this is what Keeley was trying to do, that he would play his violin or do something else that would create vibrations that his machine could resonate with. But we don't know how he did that inside the machine. But those vibrations in the machine um, will be able to detect something, and let's call it the signature of the vibrations, and determine, yes, that is a moral impulse. I will do what's requested. Today, we already have, if you take your smartphone, you can dictate to it, or using your microphone on your computer, you can dictate it to it, and it will turn speech into text. That's already an example, but not an example of a moral technology, but a technology that takes vibrations, you're speaking, and turns it into something else. So an electronic machine is capable of doing that. Steiner said the first of these machines should be done with electricity. Later, we will develop them further so that as we become more aware of the etheric realm, we'll be able to build a machine that exists in the etheric. Then the force from us will drive that machine. This moral force will drive this moral machine. So anyway,
It was a very good explanation. I think it covered most of the questions that arrived afterwards, and I'm very
okay.
happy for that. And it gave me a lot of thinking material. So I have to delve a bit deeper into this, and I'm looking forward to more on this in the future. And I'm sure our guests also. There was a question regarding, I'm sorry, uh, to the um, to the idea of the Big Bang that is thought about as an explosion, and now maybe we could think a bit more as a warmth, not an explosion. If we think about it in an anthroposophical perspective, would that be something more around the truth? Let's say maybe not the truth, but closer to it.
Right. What I would say is the outcome of, we'll use the word Big Bang for now, would be this warmth. But what was it originally? Um, and I'm going to say, I'll just use the word spirit. What is energy that comes out of the Big Bang that then brings about, as it changes its disposition, its existence into warmth of old Saturn? You know, um, before the warmth, it was spirit. So the etheric is a creation of the divine world.
Thank you. Another question was from Carlson Epstein, the Carlson Epstein. If we are part of the macrocosm, would the visualization of all of this look like a Russian nesting doll? Meaning, are
Yes,
we?
I love that. Yes, yes. So, um, and you could make the argument that the outer doll is old Saturn, or you could make the argument that the innermost doll is old Saturn. Thank you. I actually
Yeah.
was going to, I woke up one morning with that picture because on a shelf right near to the bed, my wife is Russian, from Ukraine, which is interesting, and she's got one of these stack of Russian dolls. So, and I thought, perfect, there we go.
So the etheric worked, I would say, in thought. Um, Another question would be if you could elaborate more on these bodies we will have in the future. Will
Yes.
it have to do with transhumanism? How could we meet this impulse? And I would put another question of mine in regards to this, if I may. Will there be a karma regarding this for these bodies of the seventh post Atlantean cultural age?
Whew, huge question. I will try to go through it in 2 minutes. Um, the oh geez, I'm starting to forget. So transhumanism was mentioned, and yes, I would say that the transhumanism of today, and this is a way you can look on these transhumanists and have some sympathy for them. They are actually helping to work on what will be needed in that future time when sexual procreation has come to an end. So the beginnings of it, scientists have to begin now for what will be able to be done in that seventh cultural age. So starting it now, that's transhumanism. Bringing it to manifestation and bringing it to our existence today would be wrong, just as Gandhi Shapur was too soon for its time. Um, so, uh, and yes, in the karmic aspect, those bodies will come out of that transhumanism. As I said, we will no longer be born nor die. We will treat those like we do automobiles today. We will hover about them and direct them. So this impulse that streams through us will be able to direct those bodies. They can move their arms or their wheels or whatever they've got at that time. And they might have weapons on them to conduct the war of all against all. Who knows? But to blast whoever's in front of them out of the way, if you're an egotistical person, which people will become much more egotistical because they will feel more and more separated when they live in these bodies. So those who do ascend will be doing so out of their love and brotherhood for those that remain behind. They will be working with all their heart and soul to help those who have remained behind to be able to ascend as well. And so those who are unable to at the end, it is their freedom. It has been their choice in a sense. But in a way, it's not only their freedom and their choice because they were unable to overcome materialism, they're a laggard being. And shouldn't the laggards be redeemable? And so, yes, they follow this path. And so, in a way, their karma becomes redeemable when they reach the human stage of Jupiter. And just as in early human evolution, when we go back into those earlier times, there were prior humans or retarded angels who incarnated as humans. And they were the great heroes of mythology.
Thank you so much for this image. Thank you. Oh, I'm looking. I think I saw another message, but I think we are nearing our end.
We got about, well, I'll stay for 5 more minutes, but this is way longer than I thought it would be. Sorry, everyone, for my,
Um, there's a question. The concept of healing has become very popular. Therefore, the spiritual market is growing. Market. I would say market is a very term. Are people more in need of healers now? Could be this in regard to our descent into materialism
you started out with the concept of what it says feeding here, but it
of
doesn't say
healing. Healing.
Healing, right.
Yeah.
Um, I'm going to, I think I understood the question correctly. Uh, people, we have lots of new illnesses, and many of them, if in a way, all of them are human initiated, but we can say instituted or brought to us either from the good gods or Ahriman. The illnesses, mental illnesses, Lucifer, but many of the illnesses are needed to keep us from falling into Ahriman's clutches. But Ahriman also has illnesses that want us to fall into his clutches. And so a doctor's work and a pharmacist's work and a pharmacologist's work is way more difficult today because the complexities of illnesses are reaching astronomical levels, to be blunt. It's very, very challenging, I would say, and it's going to get far worse. So Steiner points out that in the middle section, the hygienic occultism will need to develop new remedies where the time of day that they are worked on matters. The ingredients matter, just as the biodynamic preparations bring down the heavens into the preparation. So must these remedies of the future.
Thank
And
you.
again, that's a bit of this balance of supernature and subnature.
Yeah, the idea with Lucifer and Ahriman and Lucifer not letting us go towards our goal of meeting Ahriman in his own realm was again, it was enlightening. And I think there is another question shortly, because I think it's important for everybody to understand it. Is there a way to avoid the infertility of the future? And I think this should be addressed.
Right. So this will be the last question, I hope, for us
Yeah.
today. And no, why would you want to avoid the infertility of the future? Why would you want for Earth evolution to continue as it is? In a way, this is Ahrimanic thinking. And the real goal of human evolution is to have been in this physical and learned and gotten out of it all that we can for human evolution now and for the future. And so it is right that this comes to an end so that humanity can indeed leave the physical world and 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 evolve back into the spiritual world. So this is an excellent question. It's, to me, I think it's one of the most difficult things. It could be made fun of by materialists. Oh, those anthroposophists, they say blah, 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 they want Armageddon to come, kind of in the form of fertility stop. I'm not asking for that to come today. We already see a fertility problem. It's already begun, and it's only going to get way worse. We're not just going to suddenly, in 5700, come upon it. It will gradually come upon us. And there will be many a government attempting to try to get people to have children and blah, blah, blah. And there will be attempts to build baby factories and artificial wombs and all that kind of stuff. That's all coming. And none of it will work.
Thank you so much for all of this,
Mhm.
for all that you have presented to us. Thank you for your attendance. You were wonderful, and in such high numbers, I look forward to another meeting, to another webinar. And if you have any last words, maybe for our guests.
Well, remember, it's time for us to speak to the stars. So thank you all for joining. And um, and if some of you can make it to the March 28th webinar on evolution by Ari Boss, that'd be great as well. I'm also part of that group. But thank you, Ali Odor, for being our host today and moderator. So, and thank you all for attending.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.